Because in the next 30 minutes, you're going to be challenged to answer the most introspective question that any educator can ever ask themselves. This one question separates those who are going to be remembered as life-changing catalysts in the classroom from those who merely teach. You're going to be challenged to wake up every morning, walk over into your mirror, look yourself in the eyes, and ask, are you the one? Now, before I get started, because that was pretty dramatic, wasn't it? Before I get started, I'd like to know who I'm speaking to whenever I get up on a stage. So I'm curious, how many educators do I have in here that have been in the educational system for more than 10 years? Oh, wow. Quite a few of them. How many of you have been in education for less than 3 years? Now, can I let you guys in on a little secret? I knew which category you fell into long before I even asked the question. See, I have this special gift, and as I've been sitting here this morning, I've been looking back, watching all of you guys, and I've talked to quite a few of you as you walked into the room. And I've been using that gift. It's a really unique gift of observation that I have. And as I've sat here, what I realized was the new educators, those of you that have been around for 3 years or less, as you walked into the room, you were a lot like a cute little golden retriever puppy. Seeing a tennis ball for the first time. Have you ever seen a golden retriever puppy that sees a tennis ball for the first time? You break it out, their tail goes to wagging, they're all excited, they're about to explode with energy, right? And that's what you guys are like. I can see the excitement in your eyes, you're hanging on to every word. Some of you guys, whenever I walked up here, I hope I have something important to say, because some of you broke out your cell phones to take notes and snap pictures. So you're hanging on to everything that's being said. Now, those of you that have been around a while, your response was a little bit different. I saw a smile on your face, and I started to get excited, especially after that introduction, because I was thinking to myself, well, wow, they're excited to see me. Maybe they've heard me speak before. I thought for a minute I was West Texas famous. But what I realized was they're excited to see me, but it's for a different reason. See, you guys saw me coming up and you thought to yourself, yeah, bring on the motivational speaker. Because you know that I'm the last thing standing in between you and getting out of here to get your day started and get your classroom set up and everything else, right? So y'all saw me and you're like, bring on the motivational speaker, let's get this party started, get this thing over with so I can get to work. But I've got some really bad news for you guys. If you're waiting on a motivational speaker to come up to signify the end of this convocation or the next step where you can get out of here, I'll just have to tell you, I'm not a motivational speaker. As a matter of fact, I'll let you in on a secret. The whole idea of a motivational speaker is an oxymoron. I can't motivate you. I cannot motivate you. See, motivation is an inside job. It derives from that root word, motive. The reason that you began doing what you're about to start doing again this year. And I want to ask each of you to do me a favor for just a moment. I want to ask you to close your eyes for just a few seconds. Trust me on this, I'm not going to run down and pickpocket you or anything like that. Close your eyes for just a few seconds. And I want you to think back to the day that you made the decision to get in the educational field. Think back to that moment. What was it that made you make that decision? You can open your eyes. I see some heads nodding. I'm sorry. Open your eyes back up. What was the reason that you got into education? By a show of hands, how many of you got into it for the money? Got one new teacher with his hand up down here. Brand new. I'm going to buddy you up with somebody who's been around for a while. I don't want anybody to leave under false pretenses. You're going to be way overworked and way underpaid. So how many of you are legacy educators? How many of you come from families of educators, parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents? Very good, quite a few of you. Now let me ask you this. How many of you got into education because you wanted to change the lives of young people? Every hand in this room should be up. Every hand in the room should be up. See, I know in my heart that every single one of you got into this field because you wanted to shape the world around you. And you know that the most impactful way to do that is by shaping the minds of future generations to come. So I know there's a reason that you accepted the call to do this work. And before I go any further, I want to make sure that I highlight what I just said. I referred to the educational field as a calling. That's exactly what it is. It doesn't matter whether you're a teacher, an administrator, a cafeteria service attendant, a custodian. No matter what it is that you do, it's a labor of love. It is a labor of love. It has to be what you were put here to do. You have to be fully committed to the hearts and minds of the young people that you're coming into contact with. See, whether you believe it or not, the relationship that you build with these young people is of vital importance. And it doesn't matter whether you're serving them a meal, whether you're providing them with clean facilities, whether you're ensuring that they're disciplined, whether you're teaching them how to read. See, consider this. That warm meal that kid comes into the school and gets, that might be the only warm meal that they have access to that day. The facilities that you so tediously clean, that might be the only access to a clean, functional restroom that they have. The time that you spent ensuring their discipline, that might be the first time in years that someone's cared enough to correct their behavior. And the amount of time that you invested in them, teaching them how to read, or how to do algebra, or for the love of Pete, calculus. Does anybody understand calculus? Can you help me afterwards? Because I still don't got it. See, that might be the only time that someone has taken and invested with that young person in many, many years. See, the one thing that we have to always keep in mind is that every single interaction matters. The smile that they receive whenever they walk on the school bus, the nod through the lunch line whenever their account balance reads 0, the gentle word of reassurance whenever they feel like they can't do anything right. These things are critically important to every single young person you're going to come into contact with. I want you to think about this. There are 3 things that every kid needs. And each one of you can play a role in providing it. First off, they need to know that they matter. Every kid needs to know that they matter. See, in today's world of broken homes, where many children are being raised by a single parent, and we have single parents working 2 and 3 jobs, oftentimes that kid is by themselves, raising themselves. They become a casualty of the situation. And they feel like they're all alone and nobody cares about them until they show up in your classroom that morning. See, sometimes we have kids that show up in the classroom and they act out. Anybody ever have a kid that acted out in their classroom? Every single hand should be up, but I only saw one. I'm right there with you. See, we've all had that situation, and a kid who's acting out in the classroom, it's not that they're a bad kid. It's that the only time they've ever received attention at home is whenever they got in trouble. And so they've taken what they've learned at home and they brought it into the classroom. And they're doing anything that they can to get your attention. And they want your attention because you matter to them. But I wonder what would happen if rather than just writing a kid off as a bad kid, if we said, you know what, I could change the way that this interaction today goes. If you plant a seed in their mind, whenever they walk to the door, instead of you saying, oh goodness, they're here. If you would just smile and say, oh my goodness, Billy, I'm so glad to see you. You know what, I've got a big job for you today. I'm going to need somebody who's a leader. And Billy, I've been watching you all year and I know you're a leader. I'm going to need you to help me to get all the other kids in line today. So today you're going to set up, you're going to be my line leader, and you're going to make sure everybody gets organized all day. Can I depend on you? And I need you to behave because they're going to follow whatever you do, Billy. You'd be amazed at what a kid will do whenever we set an expectation, because what I've learned over time is that kids will go out of their way to live up or down to the expectations of the adults that they care about. So it's important that we make them feel like they matter. Secondly, they need to have a champion. They need to have a champion. Someone who's going to be there to extend their hand and lift them up whenever they're down. Someone who's going to encourage them when they're ready to quit. See, as we look back on it now, some of us think, well, school was easy, right? It was easy. That was the easy phase of our life. But for those students who are in it, this is the toughest thing they've ever encountered. It's a lot like running a marathon. Do I have any runners? Not a single one. Are you kidding me? Okay, there's one. Thank you. My goodness. What do y'all do out here? So it's like running a marathon. I used to run marathons, and I don't have the build to run a marathon. And what I learned was whenever you get down to like mile 22, okay, for me it was around mile 10, but when you get to mile 22, your body is breaking down. Your feet are rubbed raw. Everything in you is saying, I want to quit. But something special happens around that mile mark. As you start running down, you start seeing crowds of people. Just people from the neighborhoods, volunteers. And they're all out there with signs and they're cheering you on. They're telling you, don't stop, you're almost there, only 4 miles to go. And you keep trudging along. And you get in between mile 22 and 24. And you feel like you just want to sit in the grass on the side of the road and wait for the truck to come pick you up. And then you see somebody come jogging along and they say, hey, there's a water station 400 meters up. Let's work through it together. Let's get there. And as you keep going, there's always somebody there to encourage you, to keep you moving forward, to keep you going along. And then whenever you get to the end, and let me tell you, the point 2 is what gets you. 26.2 miles. When you get to that 26, you're thinking, all right, I'm done. And then you see the finish line, another 200-300 yards up the road, and you're just like, who played this cruel joke on me? And why? What did I do? But you hear your family cheering, and you see them, Dad, come on, you got it, you're almost there. That's what you are to these kids. You're the person on the side of the road cheering them on. Telling them you can keep going. Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't give in. And then finally, the third thing that every young person needs is they need your words of affirmation. They need to know that someone believes them, that you believe them. They need to know that. Words are incredibly powerful. And so whenever they're struggling through and you come along and you say, hey, I know it's tough, but I believe in you. And you're going to get through this. You just got a couple more months and you know what? You're going to be in your senior year. You're going to get through it. Or, you know what, we're going to take that test again. I believe in you. I know you can make it. I know it was rough this time, but now you know where your mistakes were made. Now you can improve. You can grow from it. And so when they have somebody who's planting these words of belief into them, it's a lot like a seed being planted. It's an investment into that child. Everything you tell them, everything that you tell them is an investment. It's like a Chinese bamboo tree. Chinese bamboo tree grows from a seed that's small and it's rock hard. It's rock hard. And when you plant it in the ground, you give it all the nurturing that you could give it. You give it water, you give it sun. And in year one, you get absolutely nothing. So you keep nurturing it. You keep pouring into it. And you keep investing. In year two, you get absolutely nothing again. And you just about get to that point where you're ready to give up in year three because you see nothing's coming, and then all of a sudden a little tiny sprout shoots up. It gets about an inch or two tall. And you go to year four and you're still pouring everything into you, and now here's the point where many of us would think it's not going to work. Nothing's happening. I put 4 years into this little plan and nothing's happening. You see, it's in year 5 when you get the payoff. When all of the investment into that person, into that child, starts to grow, just like that Chinese bamboo tree. Because in year 5, a Chinese bamboo tree will grow up to 45 feet in 1 year. It skyrockets from the ground. But see, whenever a child doesn't have those 3 things behind them, that's when they tend to fall by the wayside. That's when we start to have kids drop out of school. When they have no one making them feel like they matter. When they have no one who's their champion behind them, encouraging them to keep pushing. When no one's planted a seed of belief. Think about this. Every year in this country, 1.2 million high school students drop out. 1.2 million. 26 every second. 7,000 students a day. It's 26 dreams deferred every second. 1.2 million people who have been beaten up and battered by life and feel like it's time to give up on themselves. So it raises the question, what is it that separates those kids from the ones who make it? Can I be quite candid with you? From personal experience, I can tell you that it's you. It's you. It's every single one of you sitting out there that make the difference. Every word planted. Every moment that you invested into them. Everything that you did along the way that encouraged them. That's what separates those who fall off from those who end up making it. And see, this is something that I speak passionately about because I'm speaking from experience. I'm speaking from experience. Had it not been for the words of reassurance from teachers and coaches along the way, I probably would have been one of those 1.2 million. Who knows what would have happened had I not had Coach Waller in high school telling me, Banks, you could be Mike Singletary, but you just don't listen. I never thought I could be any good at football. But he planted a seed, and now I had to live up to it. What would have happened had I not had Miss Como after my mother passed away? To have her wrap her arm around me in class. To have her giving me those words of reassurance and encouragement. What would have happened had I not had her there telling me it's going to be okay? What would have happened had I not had Miss Stevens in 5th grade? See, it was her gentle words of reassurance her words of encouragement that made me who I am today. See, I learned from Mrs. Stevens that words are powerful. A single word spoken at the right time can change someone's life. But the wrong word spoken in the exact same moment can absolutely crush the human spirit. I'm living proof of that. Now, you guys have gotten the opportunity to know me just a little bit this morning. But you only know the man that you see today. So allow me to introduce you to the Melvin Banks that you never knew. He was a cute little guy, wasn't he? He looked a little bit angry, probably because his parents had him wearing that ugly shirt. So there I was, sitting at the back of Mrs. Turner's class, staring at the floor. See, what I learned over time was that as long as I didn't make eye contact with my teachers, well, they wouldn't call on me. So as I sat at the back of Mrs. Turner's class, staring at the floor, suddenly my little ploy didn't work, and she called my name. Melvin, would you come up front and read to the class, please? I'll tell you guys right now that my worst nightmare had just begun. I walked to the front of that classroom slowly. I remember my feet shuffling. It was almost sheepishly. And I was overwhelmed with a sense of emotion I had never felt before. My heart was racing, sweat beating up on my forehead. As I stood at the front of that classroom holding my book, my hands were trembling with fear. I stared down at the pages, stuttering and stumbling a bit as I tried to sound a few words out. But I couldn't. And there in front of all of my classmates and friends, I'd been exposed. I couldn't read. And if that wasn't embarrassing enough, what happened in the days and weeks following that, I'll never forget. You see, Mrs. Turner had contacted my parents, and she informed them of all of my little learning struggles. To go along with the fact that I couldn't read, I couldn't write very well. The truth of the matter is, math and I are still mortal enemies. But my father, who was a really good man and a great dad, well, he decided to do what any great parent would do in that situation. He was going to take it upon himself to teach me how to read. There was only one little problem with that. If you can believe it or not, my dad was a hulk of a man. He was a man who served in the U.S. Army for many years as a captain, fighting tours in both Korea and Vietnam. And let's just say he didn't have what you guys have. He didn't have the patience or the compassion to teach that little boy to read. And one day, when I was in the depth of my learning struggle, when my confidence was at its lowest, I sat across from my father at the kitchen table in one of our learning sessions, and he grew frustrated with me. And in his frustration, he slammed his hand down on the table and he shouted at me, "Jesus, son, you can teach a dog to read." That still gets me today. And I'm 41. So imagine that little boy hearing that come from his father, his hero. It absolutely crushed me. I began to rationalize in my mind that if you could teach a dog to read, but you couldn't teach me, something was wrong with me. I must have been dumb. And I carried that around as my belief for many years. I never really gave or expected much of myself because, well, to be quite honest with you, I didn't think that I had much to give. At least not until Miss Stevens came along. Now, Miss Stevens, she was a different kind of teacher. She was the one. She was an older lady, but she exuded energy. She was passionate. She was passionate not only about education, but about ensuring that each and every child that she came into contact with, knowing that they were gifted and they had something special to offer the world. I'll never forget what she did one day that changed the trajectory of my life forever. We were working on math problems. And as I sat at my desk struggling from problem to problem, she came strolling down the aisle behind me. When she got to me, she just stopped, stood over my shoulder and watched me work. She didn't say a word. And somehow, at that moment, by some miracle, some act of divine intervention, I got a problem now. What she did next changed my life forever. Now, she didn't make a fuss. She didn't cause a big scene. She simply leaned over, gave me a little hug on the shoulder, and she whispered very gently into my ear, "You see, I told you you were smart." Ladies and gentlemen, I had heard that statement many times before, but not once about me. In an instant, the way that I saw myself changed. Now, don't get me wrong, I was never a straight A student. But because of Mrs. Stevens, now I believe that I could be. I was never the top of my class, but now, all of a sudden, I started to believe that I was capable. I never graduated valedictorian or magna cum laude. But what I gained from having come into contact with Ms. Stevens is something far more valuable. A belief in myself. A belief that was born out of her belief in me. And ladies and gentlemen, that one moment in time, that one snapshot in history has convinced me of this one thing. Every child, every young person is one caring teacher, one committed adult away from becoming a success story. But the question that I have to ask, the question that each of you must wake up every day, walk to the mirror and answer for yourself is, are you the one? Are you the one to be the calming voice of reassurance for a child when they've lost confidence in themselves? Are you the one to reignite the flame of curiosity and the joy of learning in the mind of a child when it's been blown out by the bitter winds of life? Ask yourself, are you the one to help a child to see himself for who he is and what he's capable of becoming? Snyder ISD, I challenge you this year to wake up every morning and ask yourself, are you the one? Are you the one? I challenge you to be the one this year. Make this year different from every other year that you've ever had. You have the opportunity to change lives, to inspire minds, to help somebody get to the finish line. Thank you very much.